Missed you all. It's good to be back. As you know, this month we are discussing Thomas King's Greengrass Running Water. This month we actually have Candace from Librarian Fan Mail helping us out. She actually picked the book, and I immediately regret letting her become a part of Hello Hemlock because she does not need me to do a video this month at all. She summarized the whole book and she mentioned all of the cool stuff, so I really don't know what to talk about. So I don't know very much about magical realism, and I really love it. I think what I appreciate the most is that it is from a Canadian author, and I feel like that's kind of rare, actually, for Canadian literature to feature magical realism. So the whole God story and the creation story and the Thought Woman story, those are all really cool, and I love how the Indians, the four Indians that kind of start the story off, they are very much merging all of those different worlds. I love his use or lack of use of punctuation and quotations depending on what world and what realm and what historical segment is being focused on. In terms of Alberta and Letitia, I just thought that they were very independent characters. They were slightly problematic. For Alberta, at first you kind of get this sense that she is created by Lionel and Charlie, that she is kind of the woman that they want her to be, but she's not quite matching up to what they think she's supposed to be representing in their lives. And then you actually hear her side of things and you get a sense of her in a restaurant and her in her bedroom and her at work, and you realize that she is struggling to figure out who she's supposed to be because of these two men. And that is fairly problematic. I think it's really cool that Thomas King wrote these independent women, but I think that the problem lies in that, yes, they're independent and, you know, they don't want to be tied down to a relationship, but at the same time, they're not so much Letitia, but Alberta definitely is really figuring out who she is based on her relationships to various men. And I think the relationships that the band members or the tribe members, they use different terminology, that they had to their own history is very interesting, and the way that Norma talks to Lionel about, you know, how whitewashed he is, essentially, and she compares him to her brother Eli, who is obviously Lionel's uncle. And in one of the chapters, Eli talks about how moving away from his home and moving away from the indigenous kind of village and moving to Toronto and becoming this teacher and professor and then moving back, he was learning how to be, as they called it, an Indian. And they really play on that when it comes to things like the Dead Dog Cafe. And I believe it was Norma as well that came up with the idea and said that, you know, Letitia should just say that they are selling dog meat and say that it's something that they eat all the time and like family recipes kind of thing. And sure enough, it's tourists that stop off there, and, you know, the coworker always sticks his head out and says, you know, is it Canadian or American? What time of day is it? And that really plays a role in how their manufactured culture is represented. And then they get into some pretty real and raw stuff, like when the family is crossing the border into the States and all of their Sundance gear is like thrown on the ground and the guy's put in jail because he's telling them like it's sacrilegious and it's disrespectful to do that, and like you can't have this outfit if it doesn't have this feather on it or these feathers. And by doing that to a border patrol officer, it gets you landed in jail. And it kind of pulls the story out of that magical realism realm and back into the horrors of not only how we currently treat various different races and religions and ethnicities when going in and out of different countries here in the West, but also how we have traded those religions. The fact that as Canadians, as settlers from Europe, we were absolutely horrible to the indigenous people that lived here. And I cannot even begin to go into the historical horrors that took place in this country. But I think having that one scene where the white Border Patrol officer is kind of sneering at him and saying, like, this is the value of what your existence is to me, and this is how you're going to be treated, and this is the level of respect that you're going to receive, which is nothing. And that is historically how we have always treated Indigenous people. There's ways in which that, you know, Western culture is exploiting the Indigenous culture, and then there's ways in which the Western ideals and understanding of that disrespected culture and disassembled culture are exploited for the sake of, you know, financial security in a restaurant. The exploitation that happens is quite cyclical. Letitia, she's not offended by Norma's suggestion that she should tell the world, and at the very least tell her customers, that her family and her race and her background, like, eat dog meat. She doesn't find that offensive to kind of stretch the truth and blatantly lie about things that her culture does or doesn't do. But the exploitation of her, you know, religion or her race many, many years ago still affects her and her family today. And I guess it ties into that whole John Wayne obsession that the book has, and how a lot of characters are kind of like 6 degrees away from John Wayne. They all know who he is, and they all kind of look up to him in various different ways, and at the very least mention him. And I think it's because he totally embodies the white versus Indian, the West versus Indigenous. I really want to thank Candace for taking part in this month's read, and for picking such an awesome book, and for having so many insightful things to say, to the point where I had no idea what I was going to talk about. So thanks again to Candace, and thank you so much for watching, and thank you for reading along with us if you got to. And remember that if you're not that big into YouTube or making videos or commenting on videos, we do have a Goodreads account, and we have a page where you can go and talk about the books individually, and you can actually just go and hang out and meet people as well. So that's all there is from me, and I'm very curious to see what Jason has to say about green grass running water that Candace has not already said.